They threw you away like you were replaceable. Like your loyalty didn't matter, your presence had no weight, your effort was invisible. They thought walking away would break you, but it did the opposite. It woke you up. It forced you to see who truly stands with you and who only stood near you for comfort. You stopped begging, stopped explaining, stopped proving your worth to people who never knew how to value it in the first place. And now they watch you from a distance, realizing the same thing too late, that losing you wasn't freedom. It was their biggest mistake. They didn't see your value, but that was never your problem to fix. Some people are so blinded by their own insecurities that they mistake your strength for arrogance, your confidence for ego, and your boundaries for attitude. They couldn't recognize your worth because it would have forced them to confront their own lack of it. You were never too loud, too quiet, too emotional, or too ambitious. You were simply honest in a world that rewards people who pretend. You walked in with authenticity, and that threatened those who only knew how to wear masks. When you carry real light, you don't have to scream to be seen. Your energy speaks first. But people who live in shadows can't handle that. So they tried to dim you. They tried to convince you that you were difficult, that your standards were too high, that your love was too intense. They wanted you to shrink, to make yourself smaller so they could feel taller. And for a while, maybe you did. Maybe you questioned yourself, tried to change, tried to become easier to love. But all that did was break the very spirit that made you special in the first place. Then one day, you stopped. You stopped apologizing for your heart. You stopped explaining your dreams. You stopped begging to be understood. You realized that not everyone deserves access to the real you. And in that moment, everything shifted. You started to glow differently. You began walking with clarity, not confusion. You no longer needed their approval to feel at peace. That's when the silence became your power. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you've mastered your emotions enough not to react to noise. They didn't see your value then, but now they feel your absence. They scroll through your life from afar, pretending they're not watching, but they see it. The peace, the growth, the confidence. They notice how you no longer chase, how you no longer explain. And what eats at them is knowing you gave them a version of you they'll never get again. They thought they had time. They thought you'd wait. They thought you'd always be there when they were ready. But they were wrong. You evolved. You outgrew the space they left you in. Now, when they think of you, they feel something they can't name. Regret, nostalgia, maybe guilt. Because deep down, they know they had something rare, someone who saw them when no one else did, someone who showed up even when they didn't deserve it, and they threw it away because they couldn't see your value. But here's the truth. Your worth was never dependent on their recognition. You don't need to prove anything to anyone who couldn't see what was already shining in front of them. Their blindness doesn't define your brilliance. It only exposes how little they knew about real value. Discarded wasn't rejection. It was life's way of saying, you've outgrown this. It was your sign to rise, to rebuild, to move forward without bitterness. Because the ones who left couldn't go where you're destined to grow. They weren't built for the altitude of your next chapter. Their exit was your entrance into something extraordinary. And someday, when they see you thriving in the very life they couldn't imagine for you, they'll finally understand. Losing you was never your loss. It was theirs. Pain was the catalyst. It wasn't the praise, the comfort, or the easy days that built you. It was the nights you cried alone, the moments you questioned everything, the silence that forced you to sit with your thoughts. Pain became your teacher. It stripped away the illusions, exposed the truth, and showed you who you really were when everything you leaned on disappeared. You didn't just survive that pain, you shaped it into fuel. You used it to sharpen your focus, to rebuild your spirit, to rise stronger than you ever thought possible. At first, you didn't realize what was happening. You just wanted the hurt to stop. You wanted to feel normal again, to stop carrying that heavy ache in your chest. But pain has a strange way of transforming people who refuse to surrender. It teaches you patience when everything inside you wants to rush. It builds resilience when you have no one to lean on. It forces you to find strength in places you never thought existed. That pain that once made you feel broken started becoming the very reason you stood taller. You stopped asking, "Why me?" and started saying, "Watch me." Their absence became your discipline. When they left, you stopped waiting for someone to push you. You became your own motivation. You learned how to move without applause, how to show up without validation. You didn't need someone to tell you to keep going. You did it because you refused to let the people who doubted you be right. You turned that silence into your structure. While they were busy talking, you were busy working. While they were pretending not to notice, you were quietly becoming unstoppable. There's something powerful about solitude when you finally stop fearing it. You realize it's not loneliness, it's elevation. It's space to hear your own thoughts, to rebuild your confidence, to train your mind for everything they said you couldn't handle. That silence that once hurt you now protects you. It's where you plan, where you grow, where you come back stronger. You stopped chasing noise and started building peace. And from that peace, your power began to rise. The version of you that stands now is one they can't reach anymore. Not because you're bitter, but because you've outgrown the frequency they operate on. You see the world differently now. You value differently. You love differently. Pain forced you to grow in directions that comfort never could. You stopped reacting, started responding. You stopped seeking revenge, started seeking purpose. You became everything they couldn't handle: disciplined, calm, focused, untouchable. They thought the pain would break you. Instead, it built you into someone they'll never have access to again. Their silence created your strength, and now your peace is the loudest thing they'll ever hear. You stopped begging for tables. You built your own. There came a point when you got tired of waiting to be invited, tired of trying to prove that you deserved a seat. You realized that every time you begged for a place in someone else's world, you were shrinking in yours. So you walked away from rooms that made you feel small. You stopped chasing validation and started creating value. You built your own space, your own vision, your own rhythm, and that was the turning point. You no longer needed people to see your worth because you started seeing it yourself. It wasn't easy. Building your own table meant starting from nothing. It meant working when no one clapped, staying up when no one cared, believing in yourself when even your reflection looked uncertain. You didn't have the luxury of shortcuts or constant support, but what you had was hunger. You had a vision no one else could see. And brick by brick, with every lesson, every setback, every scar, you built something solid, something that couldn't be taken from you because it was made from you. When you stopped begging, you found freedom. You no longer needed to convince people to like you, love you, or include you. You stopped shrinking your dreams to fit their comfort. You stopped adjusting your light to make them feel secure in their shadows. You learned that people who truly belong in your life don't make you question your worth. They remind you of it. And that's when you realized you never needed their table. You were meant to create one that others could gather around, one that stood on authenticity, purpose, and strength. There's something unshakable about the confidence that comes from self-reliance. When you know you built your life without shortcuts, when you know that every win came from sweat, silence, and sacrifice, no one can take that from you. You stopped explaining your success to those who once overlooked you. You stopped trying to prove anything to those who doubted you. You understood that real power doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt. It's seen in your consistency, in your peace, in your progress. Now they look at you differently. The same ones who ignored you, who made you feel like an outsider, now wonder how you did it. But you don't owe them explanations. You didn't build this to prove them wrong. You built it to prove yourself right. The moment you stopped begging was the moment you became unstoppable. Because power doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from being authentic. You stopped waiting for permission to shine. You created your own light, your own lane, your own legacy. And now, instead of asking for a seat, You're designing the room. They laughed when you fell. They smirked when you struggled, whispered when you stumbled, and found comfort in your pain because it made them feel superior for a moment. They told stories, exaggerated your failures, made you the punchline of their insecurities. They believed your fall was permanent. They thought the version of you that was down was the one that would stay. What they didn't realize was that your fall wasn't a failure. It was a foundation. It was the point where you stopped pretending, stopped pleasing, and started rebuilding from truth. Falling taught you what standing never could. It stripped away every illusion, every fake friend, every shallow connection that only existed when you were winning. It forced you to learn who was real, who was loyal, and who only showed up when the light was bright. You began to see clearly, not through the lens of validation, but through the lens of truth. Falling made you humble, but it also made you hungry. You learned to depend on yourself, to move quietly, to trust your own voice again. You stopped needing applause because you realized silence is where strength grows. Every insult became fuel. Every whisper became motivation. You didn't need to argue or defend yourself. You just worked. You put your head down and built in the dark while they laughed in the light. You learned that revenge isn't about making them hurt. It's about showing up, stronger, calmer, wiser, and letting your success do the speaking. People forget that what they laugh at today often becomes what they admire tomorrow. The same ones who mocked your pain are now forced to watch your rise with quiet eyes and heavy hearts. Now, they whisper when your name is mentioned. They pretend not to see you, but they do. They see your progress, your confidence, your peace. They watch the life you've built from the same ruins they laughed at. But there's no hatred in your heart anymore, only distance, because you've outgrown the need to prove anything to anyone. You don't seek revenge, you radiate results. You're not the same person who fell. You're the person who learned to fly without wings. It's ironic how silence becomes louder than noise. The laughter that once echoed has faded into quiet observation. The same voices that mocked you are now silent, not because they care, but because they can't compete with what you've become. And you? You don't gloat. You just move differently now, with grace, with focus, with calm power. You learned that the best response to mockery is mastery. You turned humiliation into elevation, doubt into discipline, pain into peace. They laughed when you fell because they thought it was the end. But what they didn't know was that you were only pausing, gathering strength for the rise that would silence every sound they made. You didn't lose love. You lost manipulation disguised as care. You didn't lose friends. You lost people who clapped louder for your mistakes than for your progress. You didn't lose stability. You lost the illusion of it. What left you was never loyal to you. It was tied to your silence, your compliance, your willingness to settle. The moment you started demanding better, it couldn't stay. And that's not something to grieve, that's something to celebrate. Because peace doesn't coexist with disrespect. Growth doesn't happen next to doubt. Purpose doesn't flourish around distraction. It takes time to see it. At first, you'll miss them. You'll miss the routine, the familiarity, the version of yourself that tolerated less because it felt like love. But one morning, you'll wake up lighter. You'll breathe deeper. You'll feel the space that used to be filled with tension now occupied by peace. And that's when you'll understand losing them wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The beginning of your clarity, your boundaries, your self-respect. You'll realize that peace isn't found in getting people back. It's found in not needing them anymore. Sometimes the greatest gift life gives you is the goodbye you never got to say. The one that doesn't come with closure or explanation, just silence. The kind that forces you to find your own answers. It hurts, but it also heals. Because you stop waiting for apologies that will never come. And instead, you start forgiving yourself for staying too long. You didn't lose them. You found yourself. You found what peace feels like, what respect sounds like, what love is supposed to mean. You stopped bleeding for people who never deserved your heart. And now, The emptiness they left has turned into space for everything real to finally enter. Growth isn't pretty. It's not poetic or peaceful like people make it sound. It's messy. It's confusing. It's waking up one morning feeling strong and the next feeling completely lost. It's choosing to let go of people, habits, and versions of yourself that once felt like home. It's standing in the mirror and realizing that the person you are no longer fits where you're going. Growth demands that you outgrow, and outgrowing always hurts. You start to see the truth behind the smiles, the silence behind the words, and you begin to understand that not everyone is meant to stay once you start changing. There are days when you question if it's even worth it. The loneliness feels heavy. You start missing the comfort of the old, even when it was toxic, just because it was familiar. You wonder why becoming better has to come with so much isolation. But growth doesn't happen in crowds. It happens in solitude. It's in those quiet moments when you finally face the things you've been avoiding. The pain, the fear, the insecurities, they surface, and you can't run from them anymore. You have to sit with them, listen to them, and then let them go. People will misunderstand your silence. They'll think you've changed in a bad way, that you're distant, arrogant, or cold. But what they don't realize is that you're healing. You're protecting your peace, your focus, your new direction. Growth isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. You stop explaining yourself because you realize not everyone deserves access to your evolution. You stop seeking validation because you finally trust your own path. And even though it's lonely, there's something pure about walking alone with purpose. You start to appreciate the struggle. The pain that once broke you starts to shape you. You begin to see how every disappointment, every loss, every betrayal pushed you closer to who you were meant to become. The loneliness becomes your teacher. It shows you what you need, what you value, and what you will no longer tolerate. It builds discipline, patience, and resilience. You start loving your own company, your own silence, your own strength. That's when the pain begins to make sense. Growth is never glamorous. It's made of tears, sleepless nights, and quiet victories that no one sees. It's saying no when it would be easier to say yes. It's walking away from what doesn't serve you, even when it still hurts. But one day, you'll look back and realize the struggle wasn't breaking you. It was building you. Every scar, every setback, every sleepless night was shaping the version of you that could stand tall in peace. And that's when you'll finally understand. Growth isn't supposed to look good. It's supposed to make you good. Success doesn't need revenge. It needs focus. You don't owe anyone a performance to prove that you've made it. You don't need to post, announce, or explain your progress to people who never believed in you. The ones who doubted you are already watching, even if they pretend not to. The best way to respond to disbelief is to keep moving, quietly, deliberately, without distraction. Because real success isn't loud, it's felt. It's the peace that comes from knowing you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You've shifted from seeking attention to earning respect, and that's a level most people will never reach. At some point, you realize revenge is just another form of attachment. When you chase validation through proving people wrong, they still control you. They live in your head, shaping your drive and defining your wins. That's not freedom. True power is when you no longer care if they notice or not. You work not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. You learn to keep your focus on the goal, not the noise. Because every time you look back to see who's watching, you slow down. Every time you let resentment fuel you, you risk losing sight of your purpose. You understand now that silence is stronger than revenge. Let them wonder how you did it. Let them guess what changed. Let them see your peace and mistake it for pride. That's fine. You no longer owe them clarity. What they see is the result of focus. Mornings you didn't feel like getting up, nights you stayed consistent when no one noticed, days you kept going without a single compliment. That quiet work built you. It taught you that the ones who laughed at your struggle were never your audience. They were your lesson. There's a difference between success that seeks attention and success that seeks peace. The first one needs applause to feel real. The second one doesn't care who's clapping. When you reach that place, life becomes lighter. You stop reacting, stop defending, stop proving. You realize that revenge is temporary, but focus is eternal. Revenge satisfies your ego for a moment. Focus feeds your soul for a lifetime. It's what allows you to walk away without anger, to win without noise, to heal without validation. So you stay focused. You stay disciplined. You stay silent. You let your results speak the language of effort, and you let your peace do the talking. The people who tried to tear you down will feel the shift, not because you shouted, but because you no longer care to be seen. You've outgrown the need for revenge. You've replaced it with purpose. And the truth is, the greatest revenge was never success. It was peace, because peace means they no longer have power. Peace means you've already won. They'll come back, but not because they miss you. They'll come back because they miss the version of themselves they could only be when they were around you. You gave them a kind of peace they didn't know how to keep. You gave them comfort, patience, understanding. Things that felt too easy when they had them, and impossible once they were gone. You made them feel seen, heard, and valued in ways they didn't even recognize until you were no longer there to offer it. Now they remember the way your energy felt, the calm you brought into their chaos, the warmth you gave without asking for anything in return. But it's not love they miss. It's the reflection of who they were when you were loving them. At first, you'll feel it. The messages, the small check-ins, the casual, "How have you been?" that tries to sound innocent, but carries the weight of regret. They won't say it, but you'll sense it. The guilt, the nostalgia, the silent wish that they could step back into your presence without having to admit why they left. You'll recognize their voice, their patterns, their timing, and a small part of you might feel that old ache, that familiar pull toward what once felt safe. But then you'll remember the truth. They didn't lose you by accident. They lost you by choice. You were not a phase, not a filler, not a temporary escape. You were a mirror. You reflected back their best qualities, the kindness, the ambition, the potential they forgot they had. You made them want to be better, not by demanding it, but by being it. And when they couldn't sustain that version of themselves, when they couldn't meet the level of energy and love you gave, they left. People often walk away not because they don't care, but because they can't handle the accountability that comes with being truly seen. Now that you've grown, healed, and built your peace, they'll want to come close again, not because they've changed, but because they feel empty without the version of themselves they used to be around you. But this time, you're different. You've learned that love doesn't mean saving someone from their own chaos. You've learned that peace isn't found by going back to what broke you. You no longer crave their return because you've found yourself in their absence. You don't need their validation or their apology to move on. You already have closure. It came the day you decided not to answer. So when they come back, stay grounded. Remember the lesson, not the feeling. They don't miss you. They miss how you made them feel. But you've outgrown being someone's temporary light. You're no longer a safe place for people who leave when it gets dark. Stay gone, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because some doors don't deserve to be reopened, not when peace lives on the other side of goodbye. Your evolution is their karma. You never had to expose them, never had to get even, never had to make them feel the pain they gave you. Life has a way of doing that on its own. You didn't need revenge because time took care of everything. The truth is, the same people who doubted you, disrespected you, and underestimated you are now haunted by the very thing they tried to destroy: your growth. They never imagined you'd rise this high. They thought breaking you would end you. Instead, it became the beginning of your transformation. You didn't evolve to hurt them. You evolved because staying the same was killing you. You grew because the pain demanded it. Every tear, every betrayal, every sleepless night pushed you toward becoming the version of yourself you were always meant to be. You started paying attention to yourself the way you once paid attention to them. You started pouring into your goals, your healing, your peace. What they broke, you rebuilt. not to show them what they lost, but to remind yourself what you're capable of. That's the quiet revenge they'll never escape. Seeing you stand where they once said you'd fall, living the peace they swore you'd never find, becoming everything they thought you couldn't be. That's karma working in silence. It's not just your success that hurts them, it's your peace. It's watching you live unbothered, watching you smile without them, watching you move forward without carrying the bitterness they hoped you'd drown in. They expected your pain to destroy you, but it disciplined you instead. You stopped reacting to their chaos, stopped defending yourself, stopped explaining your worth. You learned that silence is the loudest response, and peace is the most powerful form of revenge. You don't need to wish them harm. Your evolution already makes them face the truth, that they were never the loss. There's a moment when everything shifts. You stop waiting for closure, stop replaying the past, and realize that their part in your story was simply to wake you up. You see how every heartbreak, every rejection, every disappointment pushed you toward purpose. They weren't sent to ruin you. They were sent to reveal you. That's the beauty of evolution. It doesn't seek to punish, it seeks to purify. It removes everything that's not meant for you, even if it hurts. And when you finally rise from that, when you walk into a room carrying quiet strength, they'll feel it. They'll feel the distance, the growth, the peace they can no longer touch. You never had to prove them wrong. You just had to become right with yourself. Your evolution became the mirror that reflects everything they lost. They'll see it in your calm, your discipline, your glow. And though they'll never say it out loud, they'll know. Your evolution was the karma they earned, and your peace is the justice they can't undo.